Welcome back, everyone, to the Risk Intel podcast, powered by SRA Watchtower, where we share risk intelligence with experts from across the banking industry. I'm your host, Ed Vincent, CEO at SRA Watchtower. Welcome back to the Risk Intel podcast. I'm excited to have Jeff Fink return to the program with us here today. Jeff, thanks for joining us. Welcome back.
Thank you. Great to be back. Appreciate it.
Jeff, we talked in our last episode about this concept of data strategy and what a data strategy is and what it isn't. And that was on the heels of an earlier episode where we talked about going from stuck to start, right? How do you get out of the starting gate? And one of those steps is think about your strategy. What are you trying to accomplish? In our first conversation, we talked about what a data strategy is, and we talked about it being living and breathing and agile and evolving. You also drew a distinction between that and reports,
Yeah.
which perhaps are really more of a moment in time and a snapshot. So let's pick it up from there and let's really unpack this distinction between a data strategy and reporting and why they're not actually the same thing, and expand upon those differences and really what does a data strategy allow you to accomplish.
Yeah, no, thank you, Ed. And a great topic, about, data strategy being, thinking about it is as proactive and it's putting a framework in place and realizing that our needs are going to change over time. But yet, we've got the framework and this foundation in place that helps us think about, how we would tackle these things in a best practices approach and tying them to our strategic goals in a proactive manner versus, reporting being more reactive and thinking about, I'm going to have, whether it's management requests or board requests, I need this. I want to understand, that. And those are important. Obviously, those are requests that need to be filled and filled quickly, but it is really about that moment in time. And again, when I think about a data strategy, I think about that it's forward looking. We're going to ask questions like, how will we use, as an organization, like how will we use our data to drive loan growth or to reduce our risk in the future. And so, again, our needs might change, but what we've kind of set up with a foundation that we can start asking questions like that and we've got the framework, to be able to answer those questions. And thinking about, how do our data needs change over time? So in the next 2 to 5 years, how might our needs change? So we start thinking about things like that when we're building a data strategy versus, we're in reactive mode and, we've got an ad hoc request, from executive management, and we just need to get that out or we need to use data to build a report or some kind of visualization that analyzes a given subject area, and we get that out quickly. But its value fades over time. I could say that about almost, all reports that they're great in the moment, but that value does fade over time, and that's okay. That again, our strategy is not tied to reports. It's tied to data and how we process that data, how we collect it, how we manage and analyze it. And then, over time we're able to again change our focus, build new reports, and again, our strategy is put tools in place that allow us to continue to leverage, those data assets that we have, and build new reports that don't take, a week or even a day to build, because we've laid that foundation of what are the right tools, given our user set and the user roles that we have across the organization, what's the best tool for each of those roles so that things, can be done quickly, again, in a more agile or incremental approach. And we just keep repeating that pattern of hearing a question and being able to answer it quickly with the right tools, because we've set our data, up with a foundation and a framework that allows our users to really gain insight from that data and gain ROI from this data platform that we've put in place. That's a really key asset to the institution.
It sounds like, Jeff, then that the reports, right, you use the moment in time versus
Yeah.
forward looking, but I think that this other theme that you introduced here is maybe dynamic or static or strategic versus tactical. That the report answers the question in the moment,
Yeah.
whereas the data strategy allows you to answer the question today, tomorrow, and the next day. And so if you have to do the work, right, to put yourself in that position where you've got the data in a place that it is accessible. I think you used some words. Is it accurate, complete,
Yeah.
and what there's a third one you have as well
Or
that you
organized. Yeah. Yeah.
organized, right? And so you're organized, accurate, and
Yeah.
complete. You need your data in that state in order to be able to create the next version of the report and answer the next question as it comes. But if you don't have your data in that state, then you're not going to be able to respond to those questions when they arise.
That's right. Yeah, you're right. You've got to have that already in place so that we can empower our employees of each institution to be able to leverage data to make decisions, and that just doesn't happen by chance, or let's say if that framework and foundation is not in place, what happens is it just takes longer. That our employees know the data and they can put it together, but there's manual effort. They're more data collectors and then report builders than they are analysts. And again, making decisions, in a data-driven culture, is a lot different than one that's not. And I think that's where you can think about boy, these really, data is really a strategic asset of our institution. And I can measure that. I'm getting ROI, from this data platform that we've put in place, this single source of truth that really is that treasure trove that allows our users and empowers our users to make decisions quickly with facts and not gut reaction.
You introduced the word culture there
Yeah.
in your remarks, and if I think about, right, the other answers to that question of why is reporting not a data strategy, right, or why is it, right, it's a tactical output of a data strategy. It seems like culture is probably a part of that answer as well. That
Yeah.
you don't create culture through creation of a report. You create that culture by having a strategy and an approach. So, are there other elements here that you would highlight that draw the distinction between a report and a data strategy?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned, the word culture, because I think, that's part of it too, that a data strategy is going to focus, on the people, more than, that output. And so focusing on people and not just technology, that means we're thinking about, data literacy, making sure we have that business glossary or that data catalog that every user in our company that needs access to the data can understand what they're looking at and how it's being measured and managed. And so we've got that consistency, that literacy across the organization. That's a stronger institution when you have that. And so, to do that, you've got to make those investments. So training programs, when we talk about, data governance, and maybe that's a topic we can get into in a future session, but having governance councils, appointing data stewards and really those champions, across the business units, that is building up that knowledge. And we talk a lot about the word insight. I really love that word. And it's not data, it's not information. Insight really means I'm able to glean something to better serve my customers, better understand our organization and you know, our processes and our people. And I think, you know, a data strategy is the heart of that. And again, um, tying it back to our strategic goals and knowing that, you know, data, you know, we want to be a data-driven organization. We're going to create that culture, but it does, you know, come with, you know, investments need to be made in tools and technology to make sure we have you know, our users can leverage, you know, the data in the right ways based on their roles, their technical ability, and that we give them some training and so they can be empowered, you know, to make better, quicker decisions because they've got the facts and not just, you know, relying on gut reaction.
And Jeff, it's an important distinction there, and bringing people and
Yeah.
culture into the mix there again is a, I think, a very stark contrast between a reporting approach and a data strategy. So I think you've given us quite a bit to think about there, from being proactive versus reactive, and being organized, accurate, and complete with our data that allows us to then be able to utilize reports as a tactical tool, and then really understanding the distinction and the impact of culture on these two differences of reporting versus the data strategy. So I think we'll wrap here, and I'll ask you to come back and we'll have one more final conversation here about what does a community financial institution do at this point, right? How do they move forward? What do they do instead of just creating reports
Yeah.
to kind of bring us back to that? How do we go from stuck to start? And we'll wrap our series with that conversation. So we look forward to having you back for that. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yep. Thanks.